Well, it's a good question, because that's the big thing that people say is why we can't go there. 30% of the oil that we currently use comes from the Middle East. Now, it turns out that your car, the one you're driving right now, can run on 50% alcohol with no modifications whatsoever. The modern vehicle computer is able to make adjustments, just like it does for winter and summer gas. There's differences in that, and the computer makes adjustments for the differences. It can continue to adjust for alcohol in any car up to 50%. So you can see very radically that if we only replaced 30% of our fuel with alcohol, blended it with gasoline, we'd need no oil from OPEC. And that would be kind of a good thing if we didn't have to be in the Middle East, wouldn't it? Now,
of course.
you can also talk about running your car on straight alcohol, which takes some minor modifications. So, in the book that I have on alcohol, I explain lots of off-the-shelf ways that you can take common auto parts and use them to modify your current car for usually less than $300, sometimes as little as only $50, so that you can, instead of running 50%, you can run 100% alcohol if that's what you want to do. Now, you were saying, what do I do when I'm, away from my still? Well, right. Dual fueling is something that is really practical. In fact, you can buy cars and have been able to buy cars from Detroit that run on both alcohol and gas since 1994. Those are called flexible fuel vehicles, and they've essentially just use a smarter computer that's able to adjust over the whole range of alcohol or gasoline mixtures. There are millions of those on the road. You can pick them up at auctions, from government auctions all the time. I've got a 2000 Ford Ranger pickup truck that was made right there in Detroit to run on both alcohol and gas. Now, there are about 2,000 stations in the United States where you can actually buy alcohol at the pump. It's called E85, which is 85% alcohol, which is certainly better than buying gasoline. So, you can also get kits. Some are made in Brazil and some are now being made in the United States that you can slap onto your car, which makes your computer smarter, so like an additional computer, and make your car into a flexible fuel car so you can run on both alcohol and gasoline, so you don't have to worry about what happens when you get out of range. So we have a whole range of solutions, and generally below $300, that you can either do yourself out of parts from the store, or you can even buy kits to do it, and your car can run on both alcohol and gas. On the assembly line, it only costs an extra $30 to $40 to make a car run on both fuels than it does to just run on gasoline. So there's a lot of talk in the Obama camp about making it mandatory that any car sold in the U.S. is flexible fuel, phased in over a period of years, give them 2 or 3 years to get their act together to do it. In Brazil, when the first company, Volkswagen, went flexible fuel, the other car companies had to catch up or not sell any cars. And within 3 years, all the car companies in Brazil were only making flexible fuel cars, and nobody makes a gasoline-only car anymore because you can't even sell it used. Nobody wants it. Now, I'm out in California where that's, we're already starting to see the effects of peak oil, where if you've got an SUV and you want to trade it in on a new car that has better mileage, fat chance. Nobody's going to take that SUV off your hands. They're choking on lots of those, and you can't even trade them in anymore. That's what happened in Brazil when they started going flexible fuel, is people couldn't sell gasoline-only cars for anything. Nobody wanted them.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I'm just trying to figure out, obviously there's money to be made in this solution here.
Man,
so
that was awesome.
My brain's turning in several directions here, Ben. And yeah, I mean, it's a great analysis, and it just kind of opens up the eyes as to, what we can do and what we can't do, and really what the bigger picture is. And
what's practical.
Yeah, well, and that's what it is. And it sounds to me, David, like, what you're talking about is practical, that if you have enough time and effort, and if you can put the money into it and have the patience to learn, that yes, it can happen. But obviously, when you talk about a grand scale, I don't think this whole country is going to adopt those techniques. We have a break coming up, David. Stay with us. We'll take phone calls on the way back, and then I want to basically ask the question is, where do you see this country in 3 to 5 years, given this apparent oil crisis? And then we'll talk a little bit about peak oil when we return, folks. AnimalFarmShow.com. When we get back, more David Bloom and your phone calls. Stay tuned.
You are on The Farm, the Animal Farm, the one and only. 512-646-1984 is the number to reach us. We are talking to David Bloom, author of Alcohol Can Be a Gas. David, do you mind if we go to the phone lines and take some phone calls?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Let's start with Robert from Arizona. You're on the line.
Oh, fantastic. I'd like to know about waste products. What kind of waste products can we use to make ethanol in North America, and how much ethanol could we make just using waste products that's currently dumped in a river or thrown in a landfill?
Oh, you hit my favorite subject, which is using what's going to waste. One of my favorite sources of alcohol is donuts. Cops can only eat so many, and then they have to throw the rest away. So, so like what's in a donut? I mean, it's not food, right? So basically it's starch, wheat starch. They take the good part of the wheat out and use it for something else, and they throw the rest of it in donuts. And then there's 10 teaspoons of sugar in every donut. So you got like straight carbohydrates, which is what we want to make alcohol from. So when we cook up the donuts to make the alcohol, a really cool thing happens because donuts are cooked in fat. So we get a big floating cap of fat on top of the vat that we're making the alcohol. Well, we can skim that off, run it through a fuel oil burner, and fire the still with it. So that's a raw material that we make alcohol from that comes with its own energy source. That's a pretty good one. Making alcohol from donuts, about 30 cents a gallon, and a pickup truck full of donuts will make you 100 gallons. The first time I did this was back in...
That's just Pius is commenting. Go ahead. Go on.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, I did this for the first time. I went to a donut shop, dropped off some drums, and said, well, call me when they're full. And they called me, like, the next morning, So, I mean, we're talking a lot of waste there. But let's go for, like, the big enchilada of waste in this country. Basically, one of the things that's a totally renewable resource is sewage. If we're not going to run out of sewage, and if we did run out of sewage, we'd have other problems. So, like everybody would be dead. So basically, sewage is treated in about 500 places in the United States using cattails. The marsh plant you see growing by the side of the road that looks like a hot dog on a stick, during the fall. Well, the base of those cattail plants, the stalks, are full of 60% starch. Well, corn is only 70% starch. So cattails grown in sewage or even just grown in the ditches is an enormous source, and using less than 2% of the equivalent of the United States farmland, if we processed our sewage with cattails, which is a really good method, it takes all the nutrients out of the water before it gets discharged, we could actually supply the entire country with all the replacement for gasoline and diesel we need, over 200 billion gallons per year. So you're looking at yields of 7,500 gallons per acre compared to corn at 250 gallons per acre. So these are the kind of things that, the oil companies don't want you to hear about, because they want to tell you that, we can't possibly make enough, we don't have enough land, we'd have to use up all of our food to make alcohol. This is complete nonsense, and this is complete smokescreen. Basically, where the oil companies are going is they're going for $150 to $200 a barrel oil, because what they want to do to replace the petroleum that's running out is go to oil shale, to gasoline, tar sands, more tar sands to gasoline like they're doing in Canada. And, of course, they want to turn coal into gasoline. But to do that, you got to convince people to pay $150 to $200 a barrel, because those are very expensive methods of producing fuel. So alcohol, you come along with alcohol, and you can produce it even from corn at like $60 a barrel. Well, if biofuels takes off, the oil companies are in deep, deep trouble. And if the reality became known that, like Brazil, the whole country can run on alcohol, they have a real problem on their hands, because, they've been trying for 100 years to buy all the farmland. But those dang farmers, they just won't sell. So, here we're talking about transferring wealth from a handful of giant corporations back to the people, back to the farmers, where they can actually produce fuel for sale in their communities. That's one of the propositions in the book, is that we cut out the supply chain. Like if a group of consumers got together and started, like we explain in Alcohol Can Be Gas, how you can go ahead and set up a neighborhood alcohol station for a few $100s per person, where you can then contract with farmers to supply you with alcohol, and you've cut out everyone in the middle, and you're giving your money directly to farmers to supply you in the city with your fuel, now you've done a thing that's really pretty incredible. Because if you give $1 to Chevron for your gasoline, or sorry, $100 to Chevron for your tank of gas, you know, $99 of that goes to Geneva, into some Swiss bank account. But if you go ahead and give your money for alcohol to a local farmer, well, that farmer then says, I've got to get my truck fixed. So he takes some of your dollars and he gets his truck fixed at the local mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, the picture itself here, David, just seems to be being painted. I mean, we know what the picture looks like. It is this fascist type of country where you have government in hand here with corporation, of course, oil corporations.
That's the definition of fascism, right?
Exactly, and it seems like that's obviously the biggest problem, and that, you know, you explained it really well, that we have this ascension of the price of oil, a barrel of oil. I want to keep moving on the phones, though. Robert,
I love freedom.
Yeah, Robert, thank you for